wrestling in WWE hasn't always had a place in the sun, and in fact has often been relegated to barrel-bottom status. Notwithstanding strong periods like the latter half of the 80s and the turn of this millennium, there have really been times where it feels like tag team wrestling is the last thing on WWE's collective mind. This video will explore a rather eclectic club of wrestlers, the sheer majority of whom are genuine talents, a few of them pantheon-level superstars. But what they're represented by here is hardly the strongest run of their career, a point when they and another individual played the role of stopgap tag champs, leaving very little footprint historically. And to make this a little more challenging, this video is only for those teams who have at least one reign that surpassed 30 days. A blink and you'll miss it reign is understandably forgettable, but a sustained run that ultimately proved unmemorable only adds to the futility and/or apathy of those in charge. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 forgotten WWE Tag Team Champions. Join us. Number 10, Charlie Haas and Rico. The classic mismatched duo, Haas the dry as toast technician with little time for silliness, and Rico the colourful heir to the exotic Adrian Street playbook. It wasn't exactly the world's greatest tag team, but while Shelton Benjamin ascended the ranks over on Raw, Haas found a decent second life as a no-frills athlete who gradually accepts his tag partner's eccentricities after spending many weeks being disturbed by them. For 2 months, Charlie and Rico reigned over a depleted SmackDown tag team division that had gained the Dudley Boys but lost the APA, Haas and Benjamin, and were about to lose the patched-over Too Cool combo of Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty, who lost SmackDown's tag belts to our subjects here. It was in said match that Rico found unusual ways to nullify Rikishi's ass-related offense, creeping the big man out with his overtness. The tandem itself was fine, and hey, it did bring Haas closer to eventual wife Jackie Gader. But after losing the belts to the Dudleys, they slipped down the card, and once Rico was let go by year's end, their impression proved not to be a lasting one. Number 9, the Body Donners. In the mid-90s, Chris Candido was one of the top prospects of the Indies, reigning briefly as NWA champion at age 22 and piecing together an impressive resume in places like Smoky Mountain Wrestling. When WWE came a-callin', he and girlfriend Tammy Sitch came aboard as fitness gurus Skip and Sonny, and it didn't take long for WWE to establish which half of the duo they were going to focus on more. Little hint, it wasn't the athletic and skillful Candido. Adding veteran Dr. Tom Pritchard to the group under the rather lame handle of Zip didn't diminish the focus on Sonny, who won the Slammy for Manager of the Year 24 hours before the Ips won the vacant WWF World Tag Team belts over the Godwins in a tournament final on WrestleMania 12's pre-show. Sonny deserted the two right after they lost the belts 7 weeks later, and Candido acrimoniously quit the company that autumn, rendering the Body Donners a blip on the historic radar, and just something that Candido, Sitch, and Pritchard once did. Number 8, Taz and Spike Dudley. Within months of their title win over the Dudley Boys, Taz was retired from the ring, and Spike was back to palling around with his illegitimate half-brethren anyway, so this feels like some sort of fever dream conjured up after watching a little too much ECW on the network. But it was a real thing, as Taz and Spike, both identified somewhat by their diminutive heights, were cast as giant killers. On the same night inside Madison Square Garden that Triple H, sponsored by U2, made his grand return from a quad tear, Taz and Spike defeated Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley in a hardcore match to win the titles. About all that's memorable from their reign is their winning of a short rematch at the Royal Rumble 2 weeks later, before they unmemorably ceded the belts in February to Billy and Chuck, who proved to be far more than just a makeshift team. Taz and Spike went by the wayside immediately after dropping the belts, and Taz soon after found his calling in life, making Michael Cole into a competent announcer. Number 7, Right to Censor. They did more than just enter to the catchiest theme music this side of Taylor Swift's Shake It Off. They also had their share of championship glories. While Ivory reigned as women's champion, the Goodfather and Bull Buchanan captured the tag team belts from the Hardy Boys on an episode of Raw in November 2000. Just as forgettably, they dropped the straps in a 4-way tag at the following month's Armageddon pay-per-view to Edge and Christian. The thing with Right to Censor is their place in a pair of title scenes was always overshadowed by the gimmick itself. The fact that they were satirizing the very Parents Television Council that fought WWE's adult-themed programming through a bitter campaign. The gimmick and the theme music are the first things anyone think of when Right to Censor comes to mind, not a brief tag title run. And since titles changed hands with great frequency in this time period, more than a few reigns were bound to get lost in the shuffle. Hence, Right to Censor's place in this video. Number 6, Michael McGillicutty and David OTUNGA. Periodically on those exciting, natural-sounding WWE kickoff panel sessions, we get reminded that regular talking head David OTUNGA is a former tag team champion, which sounds pretty unbelievable. I mean, none of us remember OTUNGA ever holding a belt, let alone teaming with a pre-Curtis Axel, Curtis Axel, when he did so. And defending a belt? Well, we could peruse through the WWE network for evidence, but that just sounds like more trouble than it's worth. Apparently, OTUNGA reigned for about 3 months as tag champ with McGillicutty in the summer of 2011, which really speaks to the lack of activity in the tag team scene, as well as its lack of quality tandems. To really emphasize how weak the division was, it took another thrown-together duo, that being Kofi Kingston and Evan Bourne, to end their reign shortly after that year's SummerSlam. Remember how mighty and strong the Nexus was? That loss to Kingston and Bourne was the effective end of the group's lifespan. Ponder that, will you not? Number 5, William Regal and Tajiri. Again, it must be stated that this video was going to be spotlighting some genuine talents, of which Regal and Tajiri most certainly are. Go back to 2001 when Regal shone brightly as the WWF commissioner, with Tajiri as his loyal sidekick. You could make a highlight reel of their shared antics from that year alone, truly one of the better double acts in the post-Attitude landscape. That was certainly a memorable use of Regal and Tajiri. Less so was their run as Raw's tag team champs in the early months of 2005. After Regal's regular partner Eugene was sidelined by a serious knee injury, their belts were transitioned onto La Resistance, only to be brought back to Regal weeks later, with Tajiri now functionally acting as Eugene's stand-in. None of the comic hijinks were present this go-around, as Regal and Tajiri were rudderless, tucked deep in the undercard, only truly visible when they dropped the belts in a tag team turmoil match at that year's Backlash. As far as placeholder champions go though, you can do much worse than these two beloved pros. Number 4, Kenzo Suzuki and Rene Dupree. The Haas and Rico pairing had already put into use the formula of ex-member of established tag team partners with an unlikely teammate to make a run at the gold again, and SmackDown sure loved its same-year repeats. The Blue Brand's succession plan for the gold went from Haas and Rico to the Dudleys to Paul London and Billy Kidman to Rene Dupree's attempt at a La Resistance International. These weren't exactly those banner days of the SmackDown 6. Dupree was initially pushed as a single star on SmackDown upon splitting from his fellow Resistors, but after a run against John Cena failed to do much for him, he French tickled his way into a partnership with the ice-cold Suzuki, who was taking on a bizarre pro-American gimmick where he would poorly sing songs following months of portraying a ruthless emperor. Factor in some truly uninspired mashup theme music, and you get a tag team that was bound together with about 3 frayed strands of duct tape. The fact that they held the belts for around 3 months speaks volumes of where SmackDown was in 2004. Number 3, Seth Rollins and Jason Jordan. 2 or 3 years later, and the whole Jason Jordan is the bastard son of wrestling prodigy Kurt Angle story feels like it's from some alternate reality. Between Jordan's struggles to get over in the role, not to mention the injuries that completely derailed his career and wiped him from all on-screen canon, it almost seems like the member of American Alpha that was tall enough to be Kurt Angle's son was but a figment of our imaginations. Jordan entered into a partnership with Rollins after Dean Ambrose was sidelined long-term with a very complicated triceps injury, and the two defeated Cesaro and Sheamus for the gold on Christmas night in 2017. Little did he, or anyone else, probably realise that he had only 11 matches left until he'd be all but forced into retirement at age 29 due to serious neck injuries. By the time of the 2018 Royal Rumble, where Rollins and Jordan dropped the belts back to the bar, Jordan wasn't even taking part in any sort of contact. Before long, Jordan was a forgotten man, and Rollins was vying for the Intercontinental strap. Number 2, Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. This was 10 years ago. Imagine being told then that the men here, the preening, lesser-pushed third of Legacy, and the flamed-out former Chosen One Intercontinental Champion would be sitting at the top of the industry a decade later. The American Nightmare and the Scottish Psychopath are each in a much different place today than they were in 2010, which is to say that they were entrenched in the mid-card shuffle, employed at the random whims of the booking. Rhodes and McIntyre won the belts in a tag team turmoil match at 2010's Night of Champions event, a bizarre affair in which the last team they eliminated was that of Mark Henry and Evan Bourne, who came together after somebody pressed the random button on the SmackDown vs. Raw 2010 character select screen. Rhodes and McIntyre went on to hold the belts for 5 weeks before losing them to John Cena and, wait, David OTUNGA again. This man had 2 tag title reigns with 2 different partners. What is this era even? Number 1, LOD 2005. First of all, the fact that John Heidenreich was a tag team champion and that his partner was not Gene Snitsky is just plain wrong. But what's even more wrong than depriving Snitsky of gold is the fact that Heidenreich was shoehorned into one of the creepiest and most disturbing angles ever cooked up to sell DVDs. No, it's not the time he and Michael Cole got to know each other, it's when Animal tried to turn him into the new Hawk. 2 years after Hawk's death, and with a Road Warriors DVD now on the market, Animal randomly came to Heidenreich's aid during a beatdown by tag champs M&M. This led to a match with the Proto Warriors winning gold in Hawk's memory, followed by weeks of Animal making Heidenreich over to look like Hawk, in a very Ned Flanders Mrs. Maud kind of way. Fortunately, somebody came to their senses after 3 months, put the straps back on M&M, and LOD 2005 went the way of LOD 2000 immediately afterward, minus the helmets and Titantron diving, of course.